And so that will go up as its own separate video tonight, and you'll see it probably tomorrow. This video is going to be, just answering questions. And maybe talking about a verse or a quote. I have quotes. So with me tonight is Robin. Hello, Robin.
Hello, Bhante.
And all the people at meditation.sirimangalo.org. Is there anybody there?
We have questions.
Oh, good. Okay, shoot.
Okay, this is a long question. Dear Bhante, when one starts practicing Satipatthana Vipassana without any prior training in any kind of meditation, is it necessary to have distraction-free surroundings? I understand that the practice has to do with being mindful of absolutely any kind of experience that arises out of the 6 sense doors, no matter how chaotic the environment, always noting the most distinct and strong experience. So basically, there is no such thing as necessity for distraction-free surroundings. But at the beginning, it feels like the practice cannot go anywhere when there are so many things happening every second. I understand that the practice is not about concentration. Is one guaranteed to eventually progress on the path by following the teaching, even if the practicing environment is chaotic from the beginning? Just by being able to have mindful moments here and there? Even though momentary concentration is the only kind of concentration that has something to do with the practice, does one anyway need stillness and quietness at the beginning?
I think you might be confusing two things, you see, because it's not the environment, but if you're talking about, so you mentioned something about just having mindful moments here and there. But okay, see, if you meant by that you don't have an environment that you can actually physically sit down and meditate in, like if you do that, people are going to hit you or scold you or think you're crazy, throw garbage at you or something, then yeah, that's problematic. If you're talking just about the distraction of your mind, well, there are limits, I think. And the whole reason for doing formal meditation in the first place is to limit our distractions. So yes, there is something to what you're saying, that it shouldn't be just full contact right away. That being said, there are different levels of distraction. If people are talking around you, that can be really difficult. But I've had meditators who were able to sit through it. I mean, I've done it. I remember once doing a course in Thailand, and there were monks sitting right outside my kuti at a table right outside my hut, talking all day. They sat there talking right in front of my hut. So I remember doing walking and sitting. I couldn't really understand. It was difficult, but eventually, really the key is that eventually your mind is able to put it aside. And that's really what we're looking for. I mean, you say your practice isn't able to go anywhere. Well, I'd wonder where you're trying to go. What does it mean going anywhere? Because the whole desire to go somewhere is really a problem. You're not trying to go somewhere. You're trying to understand what's going on in your mind. So at that moment, what's going on in your mind? Your mind is being distracted by things. So you're learning about that. Meditation is for the purpose of learning about that, understanding it. What's going on? It's about learning about your habits, how you react to things. It's about learning to react differently, learning why your reactions have problems, learning about the things that you're reacting to and realizing that they're not worth reacting to. So it's actually a very important learning practice. Now, if it's overwhelming, then you have to decide for yourself how much of a retreat you need. But that's certainly not inherently counterproductive. It just means you're weak. Most of us are fairly weak. So if you want to, that's what you're suggesting here, then yes, you can admit your weakness and you can back off. But you have to admit your weakness and say, okay, this isn't a problem with the situation, this is a problem with me. And then you have to assess as to whether you're hiding from your challenges or whether you are retreating temporarily, because eventually you're going to have to deal with it. I remember once I was in Israel, and I went and did meditation on the beach in Tel Aviv, and these flies came, and my whole face was covered in flies. It was bizarre. Well, no, not covered, but there were maybe 5 or 10 flies. And at first I thought, but if you've ever had a fly on your face, imagine 5 or 10. It's not like having an ant or something. House flies, because they have tongues on their feet or something. They're really, I shook them off and had to walk away. And I went and told the teacher, this Israeli man who's now a monk, he's a very good teacher, and he said, Noah, if you don't deal with it now, you'll have to deal with it eventually. I can't get his accent, but he had this thick Middle Eastern accent. He said, whatever experience you don't deal with now, you'll have to deal with eventually. I'm still a bit skeptical because, man, that was pretty tough. No, he's right. But I don't know that I totally agree that you have to eventually deal with it. It's not really that. That's that. It's just a sign that you're weak. And I think what he was meaning and what he was saying was not that eventually I'd have to deal with flies on my face, and that's not really the point. But there's some reason why I can't deal with it, why I couldn't deal with the flies on my face, and eventually I'm going to have to deal with that reason. There's no way out. There's no way around our aversions. No, there's no way around our problem. Eventually, you have to deal with it. So that's sort of an answer, yeah. I don't think anyone needs stillness or quiet, but I already explained that you retreat sometimes. Just be careful, because I know that I had one meditator once. I was watching one meditator once. I think I've mentioned this. He started sitting on the floor, and then we said he could use a cushion, so he put a little cushion underneath, and then I watched him from day to day, like over a couple of days. His seat got higher and higher and higher until he might as well be sitting on a chair. And I said, well, we're really trying to go the other way. It's normal for you to get lower as you go on, get more tolerant of pain and so on. So that's important, just to be careful that you're not going in the wrong direction.
Hello, Bhante. There are times when I become disconcerted by the breath that I draw, whether it be too little or too much, and feel anxious and forced to control it instead of observing it objectively as it arises naturally. I also have a diagnosed anxiety disorder and was wondering, is the anxiety acting as a hindrance by arising alongside this disruption, or is my anxiety only another object that could use more attention as it arises? And therefore is the disruption I mentioned only the product of a working, yet challenging practice? I'm sorry if this is a little confusing.
Anxiety is acting as a hindrance, that's certain, but it's only a hindrance in a sense of hindering your happiness, your peace of mind. In Vipassana, we don't really think of them as hindrances. We call them hindrances, but only because that's what they're called elsewhere. In the practice, hindrances are considered important meditation objects. So you do take them as a meditation object just like anything else. And I've talked about anxiety before. Not only anxiety, you also have to focus on as with everything, you have to focus on what surrounds the anxiety, the physical aspects. So the tension that's going to arise in your breath, probably the headache, sometimes tension in the shoulders, the heart beating fast, that kind of thing. Many different things. Fear is involved. So you're seeing how your mind works, and it works not very well. That's normal. There's nothing There's nothing that should be disconcerting about that, or shouldn't be something that disheartening. There's nothing disheartening about that. What you're trying to do is understand and learn to let go of what you can let go of, and well, through understanding, to not exactly change, but the understanding itself will change many things about your mind. It will help change the anxiety. As you watch the anxiety, you're basically teaching yourself the problem with anxiety, and your mind starts to change how it reacts to things, being less anxious, less inclined to react with anxiety or get worried about things, because you see that anxiety is useless, it's harmful. You really see it. Like normally we think, oh, I know it's useless, I want to get rid of it. It's not the same. Still have this aspect of our mind that thinks that it's good. So you change that by learning that it's not good.
And then just a continuation of the earlier question about things being chaotic. I kind of meant that the environment is chaotic from the beginning. Can the meditator ever really have mindful moments?
Absolutely. You have to understand what mindfulness is. Even if the environment is chaotic, well, what does that mean? There is sound. If there's sound, then you say hearing, and then you're mindful. What does it mean to say the environment is chaotic? If someone's hitting you, well, then you say pain, pain. Usually that would mean sound, right? The environment is chaotic just means there's sound arising at the ear. Well, sound is just sound. You say hearing.
So even if your entire meditation was noting hearing, that would be okay?
Sound arises and ceases. Did I tell you the story of what I was watching someone and they were saying, they were teaching meditation and they said, when you see, you say seeing, seeing. When you hear, say hearing. And as they said that, they were clearly following their own advice. And as they said, you say hearing, hearing. And they literally did this. And they stayed like that for a minute or two. And the meditator was confused. And I was sitting watching this happen in front of me. Incredible. It means you can become enlightened through sound, if your mind is clear enough.
Hey, Bhante. My area is very dominated by fundamentalist Christians who are very judgmental of anyone who doesn't follow their particular religion. What would be the Buddhist way to approach this? I'm not out spreading Buddhism on the street corners or making myself known, but I do not want to draw unwanted attention to myself or be an object of discrimination.
I don't, nothing hits me right away. I mean, be mindful. There's a story of a monk who came to the Buddha. I think he was an arahant. What was that? But he came to the Buddha and he said to the Buddha he was going back to his homeland, or he was going to stay in a certain land. And the Buddha said, oh, well, those people are really harsh. They're not very friendly. He said, what if they say nasty things to you? What will you do? I said, Venerable Sir, if they say nasty things to me, I'll just think to myself, oh, these people are so civilized that they don't hit me. And the Buddha said, well, what if they hit you? And he said, well, then I'll just think these people are so civilized that they don't break my bones or cause real harm. And the Buddha said, well, what if they cause real harm? And then he said, well, if they do, I'll just think, well, these people are civilized, so civilized that they don't kill me. So what if they kill you? And he said, if they kill me, Venerable Sir, then I'll just think to myself, many Buddhists, many of the beings who have sought for an assassin. It's kind of weird, and I think you have to be an arahant to really understand. Well, not even arahant. You have to understand the idea of an arahant to get this. He said, many are the enlightened beings. Many beings, many followers of the Buddha have wished for an assassin, someone to end their life. I don't know if wished is exactly the right word, but what he's trying to say is that there's no problem with death. Death isn't a problem because life is there's no meaning anymore for a person who's enlightened. They are free from attachment, and meaning he had no fear of death. It wasn't a problem for him. We said, okay, in that case, you're ready to go and live with these people. And he did, and he actually established a sangha there. That's what the sutta ends by saying. He went and lived there, and he established a Buddhist sangha, people meditating to be free from suffering, in a place that was full of barbarians. So I think some of these places are kind of barbaric. People are. You're probably not surrounded by barbarians, but to some extent, religious fundamentalists can be pretty barbaric. Huh? Very judgmental. So you just laugh it off. You have to learn to be mindful and not let it be like water off of a lotus leaf. Just like a lotus doesn't get wet. Water, the raindrops, they just fall off. Like, what do we say in English? Water off a duck's back? Is that what we say? We say something like that?
Yes.
Best way to deal with Christians, I've talked about this before, religious people, is to ask them about their religion. Learn about it. It takes energy, though. I think after a while you'd probably get tired of that. But if they approach you, it is often the best way out is to just ask them. Or else just be silent, I suppose, You really just don't want to talk, you just don't say anything. But if you talk to them, if you ask them questions, they end up tying their own noose, hanging themselves, meaning they end up damning themselves, contradicting themselves, because these religions are not very well founded on reality. It's by being unchallenged and unquestioned, not challenged, but not being forced to validate, to back up their claims and that kind of thing, that they continue, that they're able to stay strong. So there's that.
And to follow up on the question about concentration in a chaotic environment, but if there is absolutely no concentration, can someone without any prior experience in meditation just decide to be mindful now in a chaotic situation and have benefit?
Don't worry about concentration. Concentration arises through mindfulness. Yeah, you start being mindful in one moment. A person who's new to it is just not very good at creating mindfulness. Yeah, no, maybe you're right. It is a point that they're probably just going to get distracted and frustrated and so on. But I think that's more of a view than anything, If you have the view that, this is, I can't meditate, this is too chaotic, then that's the problem. So if like I've explained, and as Simon, I think, added in something useful there, if you can see it just as experience, then it's not very difficult to be mindful, and it's in fact quite rewarding. But again, it is more challenging. It's much easier to have a quiet place to meditate with one thing to be mindful of. Still very challenging.
Say you had a choice, Bhante. Say the house is noisy but the backyard is quiet. Is there anything inherently wrong with just seeking out the quiet spot?
Well, it makes it is indulging a preference, right? Potentially. There are other reasons, I suppose. It could be endorsing quiet in the sense that, you know, people, the reasons why it's loud could be that people are engaging in entertainment or talking, yakking, chatting, that kind of thing. But if your preference, if you're not able to deal with the noise, um, you know, if it's just a matter of like maybe music or I don't know. I mean, there's certain noises that are difficult. Like music is probably difficult, but definitely talking is difficult. Difficult, why? Because your mind gets naturally involved in that. So it's really distracting. It's really difficult to stay undistracted because our minds are receptive of that. But just loud noises, like let's say a big one where were in Stony Creek, was the car noises. And that is just noise, and it's interesting because we get irritated by it and distracted, and it interrupts our concentration. But that's kind of a good thing. It lets you see how you react to things. I think there's definitely a potential problem. Like if in that case you went and sought out a quieter spot, you're only going to hurt yourself in the end because you're going to be more averse to noise. Like when I had this alarm clock ticking, tick, 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 and I got more and more fed up until finally I just had to suppress the sound. And then when I got moved to another place that had two clocks on the wall and this ticking, it made me insane. And then I realized, you know, this isn't the way. I have to go another way. So I learned just to be mindful. Like it was actually affecting my walking, lifting here, lifting, moving, play, sing, because I couldn't get out of sync with the tick. Until finally I just said, okay, if I'm going to be in sync, I'm going to be in sync, and I have to learn to let go of this. And I really did. It was really quite rewarding.
And I think with that, we're all caught up with questions.
Okay, well then. Good night, everyone. Thank you, Robin, for your help. Thanks, everyone, for your questions and for watching and getting involved. I'll have a Dhammapada up soon.
Thank you, Bhante. Thank you, Bhante.